His nose broke with a sickening crack against the squad car door. 3 officers wrestled him down, laughing, while his blood pooled on the pavement. The crime? Carrying a bag of groceries while black. Handcuffed, beaten, humiliated. They thought he was just another nobody to forget. They didn't know he was about to sue the department, win, and rip their entire careers out from under them, one lie at a time. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The sun was barely setting over Huntsville, Alabama, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks when Marcus Hill left the small corner grocery store. 2 bags in hand. One thought on his mind, getting home before the rain. He didn't see the patrol car creeping up the street behind him. He didn't notice the 2 officers inside, watching him through narrowed eyes. Marcus wore khakis, a button-down shirt, and polished shoes. But none of it mattered. Not here. Not to them. The car pulled up beside him without warning. Lights off. No sirens. Hey! One of the officers barked as they jumped out. Marcus stopped, bag swaying slightly in his hands. "Problem, officer?" he asked carefully. The taller one, Sergeant Whitman, as the badge read, sneered as he approached. "You match the description," Whitman said. Marcus blinked. Description of what? Whitman didn't answer. Instead, the second officer, a stocky man named Perkins, yanked the grocery bags from Marcus's hands, tearing one open. Apples scattered across the sidewalk. "Hey!" Marcus protested, stepping back instinctively. "Wrong move." Whitman grabbed his arm roughly. "Stop resisting," he shouted. "I'm not." Marcus barely got the words out before Whitman slammed him face first against the squad car door. The metal was hot against his skin. His nose crunched sickeningly. Pain exploded through his face. Blood gushed instantly, blinding him. Somewhere behind him, Perkins laughed. "Look at this guy, acting like he's innocent." Marcus tried to speak, but Whitman twisted his arms behind him, snapping the cuffs on so tight they bit through the skin. "You think you can walk around here like you own it?" Whitman hissed in his ear. "Think again." Marcus sagged against the car, head spinning, blood dripping onto the blacktop. He wanted to scream. He wanted to fight. But he knew better. Any movement would be an excuse. So he stayed still. Took it. Endured it. Crowds started to gather, drawn by the commotion. Phones came out. Videos started rolling. Whitman noticed and smirked. "Get the suspect in the car," he ordered loudly, staging the scene like a performance. Perkins hauled Marcus upright and shoved him into the back seat like a sack of garbage. As the door slammed shut, Marcus sat there in the boiling heat, wrists burning, face a bloody mess, and something deep inside him hardened. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug. Not this time. Because Marcus Hill wasn't just another statistic. And he had no intention of staying silent. The ride to the precinct was short but brutal. Every pothole sent fresh jolts of pain through Marcus's face and wrists. Whitman and Perkins didn't speak to him. They didn't have to. Their silence screamed louder than words. When they pulled into the rear lot of the station, Whitman yanked the back door open roughly. "Out," he barked. Marcus stumbled, disoriented. Blood dripped steadily down his shirt, staining the once crisp fabric. Perkins shoved him forward toward a side door, avoiding the main entrance, avoiding cameras. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The booking officer, a young woman with tired eyes, looked up as they approached. She froze when she saw Marcus's bloodied face. "What the hell happened?" she asked sharply. Whitman shrugged. "Resisted arrest. Had to be restrained." The booking officer's mouth tightened. She glanced at Marcus, then back at Whitman. "You get that on camera?" she asked carefully. Whitman's jaw flexed. "Body cam malfunctioned," he said flatly. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. Of course it had. The officer hesitated, then reluctantly processed him. "Photos. Fingerprints. Forms." Marcus stayed silent, burning every detail into his memory. The holding cell was small, filthy, and stank of sweat. No phone call. No medical attention. No explanation. Just 4 gray walls and the constant throb of pain. Hours dragged by. Finally, near midnight, a man in a cheap suit appeared outside the bars. "Marcus Hill?" he asked. Marcus sat up slowly, wincing. "Yeah." The man introduced himself, a public defender, rushed and harried. "You're charged with obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and suspicion of theft." Marcus blinked. "Theft?" he croaked. His throat was dry raw. The lawyer shrugged helplessly. They claim you fit the description of a suspect who robbed a gas station earlier today. Marcus stared at him. I had groceries, he said flatly. I had a receipt. I never set foot in a gas station. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. You can tell it to the judge in the morning, he mumbled. He left before Marcus could say another word. Marcus leaned his head back against the wall, rage boiling inside him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. It was profiling. It was targeting. It was deliberate. And they expected him to fold, to plead guilty, to vanish into the system like thousands before him. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. Marcus Hill had a law degree. He had passed the bar exam the year before. He wasn't just some random guy with groceries. He was someone who knew exactly how to fight back. And once he was free, he wouldn't just clear his name. He would expose them. He would destroy them. Because this time, the wrong man had been pushed too far. And he was done being silent. The courtroom smelled of cheap cologne and nervous sweat. Marcus stood before the judge, wrists still bruised from the cuffs, blood dried along his jawline. Whitman and Perkins sat at the prosecution table, smug and relaxed, whispering to the assistant district attorney like old friends. The public defender barely glanced at Marcus before mumbling, "We plead not guilty, Your Honor." Judge Adams, a weary-looking man in his 60s, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Bail is set at $10,000, he said without emotion. "Next hearing in 30 days. The gavel banged. Case moved. Next. Marcus's heart sank. $10,000. He didn't have it. Not sitting in a bank account, anyway. Whitman caught Marcus's eye as the bailiff let him out, smirking, the smirk of a man who thought he had won. Back in the holding cell, Marcus sat on the cold bench, breathing slow and deep, pushing the rage down where it couldn't cloud his judgment. This wasn't over. It was just a different battlefield. An hour later, a young woman in a sharp navy suit appeared at the bars. "Mr. Hill," she asked. He stood, confused. "I'm Maya Carter," she said. "Pro bono counsel from the Civil Rights Defense League. We heard about your case." Marcus blinked. "How?" he asked hoarsely. Maya gave a slight smile. "Someone filmed your arrest. The video's already online. It's going viral." Marcus's stomach twisted. The crowd. The phones. Someone had captured it all. Maya continued briskly. "We've secured your bail. You'll be out in 30 minutes. Relief flooded him so fast it almost buckled his knees. But Maya wasn't finished. "And we're not stopping there," she said, voice hardening. "We're filing a civil rights lawsuit. Excessive force. False arrest. Racial profiling." Marcus stared at her, trying to process it all. "I'm a lawyer," he said quietly. "I just passed the bar." Maya's eyebrows lifted slightly, impressed. "Then you understand exactly how strong this case can be." He nodded once, steady now. "When do we start?" he asked. Maya smiled grimly. "Now." By that evening, Marcus was back home, bruised but free. The video of his arrest, brutal, undeniable, had racked up over 500,000 views. Local news picked it up within hours. Pressure built quickly. The mayor's office issued a statement promising an internal investigation. Empty words. Marcus knew better. Change didn't come from promises. Change came from action. He sat at his kitchen table, legal pads spread out in front of him, outlining the complaint step by step. False imprisonment. Malicious prosecution. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. And he wasn't just naming Whitman and Perkins. He was naming the department, the chief, the city, because they hadn't just attacked him physically. They had attacked his future, his dignity. And Marcus Hill was going to make sure they paid for every second of it. Starting now, the lawsuit hit Huntsville's city hall like a bomb. Within 24 hours, news vans circled the police department. Protesters lined the courthouse steps, holding signs Marcus never imagined seeing. Justice for Marcus Hill. End racial profiling. Accountability now. Inside the department, panic spread fast. Whitman and Perkins were pulled off active duty and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. A meaningless gesture. Marcus knew the playbook. Wait out the outrage, then quietly reinstate them. But this time was different. Maya worked quickly, assembling a brutal legal team. They filed motions demanding body cam footage, radio logs, incident reports, every scrap of evidence the department thought they had buried. Marcus spent long nights combing through discovery files. Every lie they had told, every false checkbox ticked, every missing report. It was all there, plain as day. Meanwhile, public pressure grew. The Civil Rights Defense League organized marches. Local ministers gave fiery sermons. Even national media outlets picked up the story. Marcus's face, bloodied and handcuffed, became a symbol. A reminder that wearing a clean shirt and carrying groceries didn't shield you from being seen as a threat when your skin was the wrong color. At night, Marcus wrestled with the attention. He hadn't asked to be a symbol. He just wanted justice. But now that the spotlight had found him, he refused to step back into the shadows. The first court hearing on the civil case was set for a rainy Tuesday morning. Marcus stood outside the courthouse steps, Maya beside him, facing a wall of reporters. He took a deep breath. "I didn't plan to be here," he said into the cluster of microphones. "But when the system fails to protect us, we have no choice but to fight back." Flashes exploded. Questions flew. Marcus kept his answers short, focused. No anger. No theatrics. Just the quiet, unshakable weight of truth. Inside the courtroom, Whitman and Perkins sat stiffly at the defense table, surrounded by high-priced lawyers and hollow confidence. Marcus watched them carefully. They still thought they could outlast him, that he would fold under pressure. They had no idea. Judge Ellison entered, a sharp-eyed black woman with a reputation for no-nonsense fairness. She read the charges aloud, each word slicing through the courtroom like a blade. When she finished, she peered over her glasses directly at the defense. "I will remind all parties," she said coolly, "that no one is above the law, not even those who wear a badge." Marcus's heart pounded. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt it. The shift, the tide turning. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was fighting. And this time, he wasn't fighting alone. He had evidence. He had the law. He had the truth. And he was ready to bury them with it. The discovery phase was brutal. Marcus sat through endless hours of depositions, watching as the facade of the department cracked, then crumbled. Under oath, patrol officers stammered and sweated, forced to explain why body cams malfunctioned so often when dealing with black civilians. Supervisors fumbled when asked why use of force reports vanished without a trace. Marcus never flinched. He took notes, tracked lies, built the case brick by brick. The turning point came during Sergeant Whitman's deposition. Whitman swaggered into the conference room like he still owned the world. Buttoned-up suit, smirk firmly in place. He sat across from Marcus, his gaze full of contempt. Maya Carter led the questioning, calm and relentless. "Sergeant Whitman," she began, "is it true you failed to activate your body camera during the arrest of Marcus Hill?" Whitman leaned back casually. "It was a chaotic situation," he said. "Technical issues happen." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "So it wasn't working?" Whitman shrugged. "Correct." Maya slid a thin laptop across the table. "Then can you explain this?" She hit play. From across the street, a bystander's video, time-stamped and crystal clear, showed Whitman's bodycam light blinking green. Recording. Fully operational. Whitman's face drained of color. Maya didn't pause. "Isn't it true, Sergeant," she pressed, voice like steel, "that you deliberately deactivated your camera after initiating force against my client?" Whitman shifted, his mouth opening, closing. Judge Ellison leaned forward sharply. "Answer the question," she ordered. Whitman's lawyer frantically objected, but the damage was done. The jury wouldn't miss what Marcus saw plain as day. Guilt. Outside the room, reporters swarmed. Inside, Marcus stayed laser-focused. Piece by piece, the truth was slicing through their lies. Perkins fared no better. Cornered by clear footage, contradicting his own incident report, he tried to shift blame onto Whitman, a move that shattered their once solid front. Marcus watched it happen with cold satisfaction. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't begged. He had brought facts, discipline, strategy, and the truth was bleeding them dry. Behind the scenes, the city's attorneys grew desperate. Settlement offers started trickling in, low numbers at first, insulting ones. Marcus didn't blink. He wasn't just after money. He wanted public acknowledgement, policy change, real accountability, and he would drag every corrupt officer into the light to get it. At night, Marcus studied case law, prepared motions, wrote strategic memos with Maya. He wasn't just a client anymore. He was a warrior. Each day, as the media pressure grew and public outrage fanned hotter, Marcus felt it more clearly. This wasn't just his fight. It was every quiet injustice, every unheard protest, every unpunished assault. And for once, the system had a face to answer to. His. The city cracked before the trial could even begin. 2 weeks before jury selection, the mayor's office called an emergency press conference. Marcus watched from the back of the packed room, arms folded, Maya at his side. The mayor, pale, sweating, desperate, stepped up to the microphone. "We have reached a settlement agreement with Mr. Marcus Hill," he announced, voice tight. "Effective immediately, new oversight measures will be implemented within the Huntsville Police Department." Reporters erupted with questions. Does this mean the officers admitted guilt? What reforms are coming? How much was the settlement? The mayor dodged, evaded, squirmed. But it didn't matter. The headlines would write themselves. City settles brutality case after viral arrest. Systemic racism allegations forced department overhaul. And Marcus Hill's name was attached to all of it. Later, in a quiet conference room, the city's lead attorney slid the settlement papers across the table. Marcus scanned them carefully. 7 figures. Full admission of misconduct. Mandatory reforms. Body cam policies. Independent civilian review boards. Racial bias training. Every demand, in writing. Maya looked at him silently, waiting. Marcus tapped his pen once against the table. He had dreamed about this moment, the moment the system admitted it had wronged him. Wronged all of them. He signed slowly, the ink drying as his heart pounded. It was done. Whitman and Perkins were fired, stripped of their pensions. The police chief resigned quietly 2 days later. The Department of Justice announced a separate federal probe into the department's practices. The city tried to move on, but Marcus didn't let them forget. He gave interviews, not angry, but deliberate. He spoke at town halls packed with citizens finally willing to believe that the rot ran deeper than a few bad apples. He launched a nonprofit organization, the Hill Initiative, dedicated to providing legal support for victims of police misconduct. And he kept showing up, day after day, meeting after meeting. Not for the cameras, not for the applause, but because change wasn't a settlement check. It was a daily war, one that required patience, strategy, and relentless pressure. Marcus never let them get comfortable again, because he knew, if they forgot, even for a second, it would all slide back into darkness. At night, when the city lights glittered outside his apartment window, he sometimes thought about the moment his life changed, that slam against the squad car door, the blood, the laughter. And he let that memory fuel him, because while they had tried to humiliate him, to erase him, he had turned it into power, not just for himself, for everyone who came after. The backlash came fast, and it came ugly. Anonymous hate mail flooded Marcus's office. Voicemails dripping with threats clogged his nonprofit's phone lines. Online trolls smeared his name, calling him a liar, a troublemaker, an opportunist. City officials who had once shaken his hand now avoided him in public. Old acquaintances crossed streets to avoid conversation. Marcus expected it. Change was never welcomed, especially not when it threatened the comfort of those who had built entire careers on silence and fear. He didn't flinch. Instead, he doubled down. The Hill Initiative expanded, hiring 2 full-time attorneys and launching a hotline for citizens to report abuse. Workshops were held in schools, teaching teenagers their rights when approached by law enforcement. And Marcus kept showing up. At city council meetings, at police oversight boards, at courtrooms where scared citizens fought charges they should have never faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was building an army. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice released a scathing report on Huntsville's police practices. Decades of documented bias. Statistical proof of targeting black residents at rates triple that of white residents. A culture of cover-ups, intimidation, and unchecked brutality. The findings validated everything Marcus had claimed, and more. It sent shockwaves through the community. The old guard scrambled to save themselves. Some retired. Some resigned quietly. A few tried to point fingers elsewhere. But Marcus knew better. Rot didn't spread from nowhere. It had roots. It had protectors. And now, one by one, they were being exposed. At one particularly heated city meeting, an older councilman sneered at Marcus across the floor. "You're just trying to tear this city apart," he spat. Marcus stood slowly, voice calm, but firm enough to silence the packed chamber. "I'm not tearing anything apart," he said. "I'm tearing down what should never have been built." The room fell silent. No shouting. No debate. Just truth. Later that night, as he walked alone to his car, Marcus felt eyes on him. Whispers. Tension. He wasn't naive. He knew pushing this far came with risks. But fear had stopped him once. It would never stop him again. As he slid behind the wheel and locked the doors, Marcus allowed himself a rare smile. They could threaten him, They could isolate him. They could smear his name. But they couldn't undo what had already begun. The city had seen the truth. And once people saw it, really saw it, they couldn't unsee it. The walls that had protected injustice for generations were cracking. And Marcus Hill was standing right at the center of the storm, hammer in hand, ready to finish what he started. By early spring, change wasn't a possibility anymore. It was a demand. New city council members were elected on platforms of police reform. The police department's training manuals were rewritten from scratch. Body cam audits became mandatory. Civilian complaints once tossed into trash bins were now fully investigated, publicly reported. But with progress came deeper resistance. Anonymous tips warned Marcus that old forces inside the department were working to undermine the reforms. Whispers of secret meetings. Talk of taking the city back. Marcus didn't flinch. He knew they would fight harder the closer he got to real victory. He prepared for it. Every public record request filed. Every secret meeting exposed. Every underhanded tactic dragged into daylight before it could grow roots. Meanwhile, the Hill Initiative grew stronger. More attorneys. More volunteers. More victories for everyday citizens who, for the first time, believed justice might actually be possible. One evening, after a packed legal workshop at a community center, a woman approached Marcus. Middle-aged, soft-spoken, a nervous trimmer in her hands. She handed him a crumpled envelope. Inside, a copy of a decades-old complaint she had filed against Huntsville police. A complaint that had vanished without a trace. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke. "They told me it never happened," she whispered. "I thought, maybe I dreamed it." Marcus folded the paper carefully. "You didn't dream it," he said. "And they don't get to bury it anymore." Stories like hers fueled him. Every forgotten file. Every erased voice. He collected them like ammunition, each one a brick in the wall he was building against the old order. The more they pushed back, the harder he pressed forward. At a televised council meeting, an old Guard supporter tried to humiliate Marcus, sneering into the microphone. "Why don't you leave it alone? Move on." Marcus stood slowly, the weight of hundreds of silenced voices behind him. "Because for people like you," he said coldly, "moving on means forgetting. For people like me, forgetting means dying." The room froze. The clip went viral within hours. National news picked it up. Civil rights leaders reached out with offers of support. Law schools invited Marcus to speak. But fame never changed his focus. Because Marcus understood the simple truth most people wanted to avoid. Real change wasn't glamorous. It was bloody, exhausting, relentless. And it was worth every second, every threat, every smear, every lonely walk to his car at night. Because for every door forced open, for every name cleared, for every citizen who stood a little taller, the world Marcus fought for came one step closer. And he wasn't about to stop now. The final battle came quietly, but it cut deeper than any before. A lawsuit filed by the Hill Initiative exposed decades of buried misconduct, not just individual officers, but an entire system of coordinated cover-ups. Supervisors, city attorneys, union officials, all implicated. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, deleted files recovered. Handwritten notes slipped into sealed discovery boxes. Marcus sat in the federal courthouse as the Department of Justice's lead prosecutor read the findings aloud. Every line landed like a hammer blow against the old establishment. The courtroom was packed, not with the powerful, but with ordinary people. Teachers, clerks, janitors, people who had lived for too long under a shadow they could never name but always felt. Whitman and Perkins were there too, summoned by subpoena. But they didn't swagger anymore. They slumped low in their seats, avoiding eye contact, as the system they had once abused crumbled around them. The judge, an imposing figure who had built his career fighting civil rights violations, leaned forward after the reading. "In my 30 years on the bench," he said, voice rumbling, "I have rarely seen such a deliberate betrayal of public trust." He ordered sweeping reforms. Mandatory independent investigations for all use-of-force incidents. Complete civilian oversight of disciplinary actions. Financial penalties so massive they would burden the department's budget for a generation. And then he turned to Marcus. "Mr. Hill," he said, "your actions have forced this city, and this court, to confront truths we might have otherwise ignored. On behalf of the justice system you fought to protect, I thank you." The courtroom erupted in applause, not wild, but steady. A rhythm of validation, of solidarity. Marcus stood still, fists clenched lightly at his sides, heart pounding against his ribs. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about memory. about making sure that the next time a young black man carried groceries home, he wouldn't have to live in fear. Later, outside the courthouse, as reporters swarmed and microphones pushed toward his face, Marcus said only one thing. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. And he meant it. Because injustice didn't disappear with one trial, one lawsuit, one verdict. It took generations to build. It would take generations to dismantle. But now, because one man refused to be silent, refused to play the victim, refused to let them write his story, the cracks had widened. And once cracks started, walls never held for long. Marcus looked out over the crowd, faces young and old, hopeful and hardened. He knew the next fight was already waiting. Another town, another courtroom, another battlefield. And he would be ready. He always would be. Months passed. The headlines faded. The cameras moved on. But Marcus Hill stayed. He walked the same streets where it all began, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a constant reminder that change was possible if you fought hard enough and refused to be erased. He launched training programs for young law students, teaching them how to fight systemic injustice from the inside. He partnered with civil rights groups across the South, building networks where there had once been only fear. And he kept showing up in courtrooms, sitting quietly in the back rows, lending silent strength to those still caught in battles they shouldn't have to fight. One rainy afternoon, Marcus visited the corner where it all started, where Whitman and Perkins slammed him against a squad car for the crime of buying groceries. The store had a new owner now. Fresh paint on the walls, a mural on the side facing the street, a black boy standing tall, groceries in hand, unafraid. Marcus stood under his umbrella, letting the image soak in. Not erased, not forgotten. He thought about his father, who had once told him, "Sometimes, son, winning just means surviving long enough to make them see you were right all along." Marcus hadn't just survived. He had built something stronger from the ashes of their hatred. His scars, the thin line across his wrist, the slight ache in his shoulder, didn't define him. His victories did. As he turned to leave, a group of teenagers passed by, laughing, jostling each other, carefree. One of them paused, recognizing him. "Hey," the boy said, smiling wide. "You're Marcus Hill, right?" Marcus nodded, a little surprised. The boy gave a quick thumbs up. "Thanks, man," he said simply. "For everything." Marcus watched them go, the weight in his chest lifting, just a little. He didn't need awards. He didn't need statues. He didn't need headlines. He had something better. He had changed the story for the ones coming after him. And he would keep doing it. Day after day, case after case, fight after fight. Because real justice didn't live in courtrooms or settlements. It lived in stubbornness, in grit, in never letting the world forget what it tried so hard to bury. Marcus Hill tucked his hands into his pockets and walked away from the mural, his steps slow but certain. Tomorrow would bring another battle. He'd be ready. He always would be. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire action and hope.